All right, back again with another video. Haven't had a topic lately that I've wanted to talk about for a while, so this one came up and I wanted to clear up some of the myths and misinformation about screw down cases. So I've got a few types here, and we'll cover a few things about them and what people need to understand the differences are between a recessed or a compression type case. A lot of people will see the screw down case and they'll go, it's in a screw down, you got to get it out of there right away. And sometimes that is the case. Not that really getting it out of there right away is going to help, because if it's in there and it's been in there for a while, the damage is already done. So it doesn't matter how fast you take it out at this point. But there is some truth to what they're saying in that a screw down case can damage your card depending on the type of case and the type of damage that we're going to demonstrate here, or give you an idea of what happens in these types of cases. So we're going to look at the first one that I have here. It's a 4 screw down case, and usually when people see these, they get really concerned and worried that a card is being damaged inside of them, where in reality, if it's a recessed case, so it is a screw down and it does use 4 screws, but there's a recessed area in this case, and this is probably, I don't know, like a 20 or 30 point type recessed area in this case. So as long as the recessed area holds the card thickness that you're putting into it, then this case is not a concern at all. So if I set this card in here, so this is just a 90 tops card, so if I just set that in there, you can see that it's sitting down inside of the recess. I'm just going to hold it here so you can see it. And it's not being compressed, right? It's not sitting on the surface. It's down into the recessed area. Now, if the card is thicker than that recessed area, and then you put this top on there and screw it down, then yes, absolutely you can damage the card. But in most cases, the thickness of that card compared to the recess in the case would be so apparent, and you would know it if you were crushing your card. And some novice collectors from the past, they may not know that, and so I give I do give some credit there that is potentially the case, but anybody that knows cards would be it would be very apparent that you're crushing the card and it's not into the recessed area. So the other thing to be concerned about, whether it's this case or any other type of case, I don't care if it's a one-touch magnetic case or a screw-down case, is that if there's any debris in between the case and the card on either side, then it wouldn't matter what type of case it is. You could potentially indent or damage the card, so you have to be careful about that too. But a 4 screw-down case with a recessed area that will house the card, it does not matter what screw. I don't care if there's 20 screws around the perimeter. I don't care how much downforce you have. The card is sitting in a recessed area. It's completely safe. It's not going to be a problem in this type of a case. The other type of screw down case that has a recessed area is a single screw down case, like what we have here. So it's a same thing, recessed area where the card will sit inside there. And again, if the recessed area is thick enough to house the thickness of the card, it will sit in there completely fine. You would be able to put this over the top, put your screw in, and that card would be completely fine. Again, you don't want the card thicker than the recessed area, or you would have a problem up on the top edge where the screw would potentially damage the area of the card where that compression is taking place. But in general, if it has that recessed area that will hold the card, doesn't matter again how many screws or how much downforce you have on it, it's going to be completely fine in there. So then we get to the 4 screw compression case, like what we have here. Now this case, this is a thin one. I've seen, back in the 80s and 90s when I was collecting, you'd see some of these cases that were 1 and 2 inch thick. I mean, just monster brick type cases. But the concept or the fundamentals that I'm going to show here are the same. Essentially, you have a flat piece of plastic, essentially, and another flat piece of plastic, and we're just sandwiching the card in between those two pieces. And what happens there, I'll just put one in there so we can kind of see what happens. So I'm just basically using the compression of the case to hold the card in place. And so once I set this on here, it's basically making contact with both sides of the card. And I am displaying compression in the areas that I'm going to demonstrate here. So I'm going to just kind of put these screws in here, not super tight because I don't want to break the plastic, but enough to definitely secure the card and probably to put a little bit too much pressure on these corners. Okay, so let's get the fourth one here. So I'm basically just applying all of that compression to these 4 screws. Okay, so there's compression occurring here, 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 and here, all 4 corners. But the compression is extending a little further. I'm going to go to the side a little bit, and then across the bottom edge probably about 1/4, and across the bottom edge 1/4, same with the top. So there's a lot of force being pushed down onto the corners directly, and then a little bit to the sides. Now what a lot of people don't understand is that through the center of the card, there is some compression taking place in the center because it is making contact with the top and bottom of the card, but the force that's being exerted in the center of this case is not nearly what's happening on the corners and edges of all 4 corners of the card. And so I'm going to kind of bring this in closer, and you can see how the case bows, right? So from this screw to this screw, you'll see a bow that forms in the middle. Now that's the same whether it's an inch thick case, a 2-inch thick case, it doesn't matter. It's the same idea. So there's a lot of force again to those edges and corners, but not in the middle. And I'll show what I mean by that. So I'm going to kind of push in the middle, and you can actually see that not with a lot of force, and I'm not pushing hard, you can actually see the center of that case compress. So there's not as much force in the center of the card as people think. It's all on these corners and edges. Now what happens is that once the amount of compression takes place, that's it. It doesn't matter if it's in there for 10 years or 20 years from a compression standpoint. Once you compress that card and you've basically put enough downforce on those corners and edges to damage the card, then that's it. You've already damaged the card. It is what it is. Now, over time, if the card is creased or if you had corners that had a little bit of a ding on them, then yes, it can flatten those out a little bit more. But again, once the amount of force is done, that's it. It doesn't matter if you did it 10 minutes ago or 10 years later. The compression has done its job and it's damaged the card. So the other thing to think about is that there's a myth about that the card actually changes size. It really doesn't. The card does not change size. You're not stretching cardboard. You're not compressing cardboard and squeezing it to be a bigger card. That's not what's happening. What's happening is I have this edge, this area that we've talked about here, and if there's enough downforce and there's enough compression that's pushing down in those areas, then you're crushing the edge and you're basically angling the edge off of the 90-degree angle that it's supposed to be. So what I mean by that is with this card here is I have a 90-degree angle. I have the surface of the card and then it drops off to a 90-degree angle of the edge, right? Now if I put a lot of compression straight down this way and this way on this corner, then what's going to happen is I'm going to take that edge and I'm going to basically angle it off or crush the edge into an angle. And people think that the card got bigger. Well, it didn't get bigger. You just crushed the edge. You just made it's not a 90-degree angle anymore. You crushed the edge. The card didn't stretch. The card didn't change size. You just crushed the edge. That's it. The corners can also be crushed in this angle in the sense that instead of the 90-degree angle where you're crushing the edge this way, is you basically crush the corner, or angled off the corner. And so with experience and a trained eye and the proper way of doing grading, they can determine if that card was in a some type of a compression case because of the way those edges have been crushed. So that's basically one of the myths that I wanted to get out of the way, is that you're not changing the size of the card. I don't care what anybody tells you, you're just crushing the edges. That's it. The other thing that that's going on is that people will talk about cards sticking to this to this plastic, right? And there's some truth to that, but there's some reasons as to why. And there's also the factor that sometimes people will put cards in a sleeve before they put it in this case. So what happens is that if you apply this compression and you put this card in the case, and then if you're in a climate where you have a little bit more moisture or a little bit more heat than other places, then that moisture gets inside of there, and you get some moisture that will occur, and then it'll dry out. You'll get some more moisture back in there, it dries out, and eventually what happens is that card will kind of attach itself to the plastic because of that moisture and that compression that's been going on there. So there is some truth to that. But if the card is in like a penny sleeve, or some type of a mylar sleeve, or something where the mylar or the polyethylene is not going to stick to the card, then you're not worried about the card sticking at that point. You're just worried about the compression that we talked about earlier. So absolutely, these cases can stick to this to certain cards. Depends on the surface of the card. Depends on how it was made, versus other cards where it's not going to stick at all. It's just the nature of that card and surface in relation to this type of case. And sometimes they'll stick, sometimes they won't. So I can't say definitively that every card is going to stick inside there, but many do, and it's a disaster when and if that happens. So hopefully that clears that up a little bit. I want people to understand that these cases are not, it's not an entire deal breaker, because the amount of compression that it takes to crush those edges is quite a bit. On the older cards, like vintage cards for example, it's very difficult to crush those cards enough to where those edges are compromised. So I'm not saying that it can't happen. I'm saying that if you see that and somebody has like a Mickey Mantle in this type of a case, it doesn't mean that the card's damaged. It doesn't even mean that it's been altered, that it's been in there. There's a lot of factors that go into it, like what I talked about. I think the biggest indicator is if you have a card like a vintage card, and you put it in there and it had a ding corner, or it had a little bit of a crease on the corner or something, that's the bigger indicator than anything. If you had a perfectly mint card and you put it in this case, and then you applied reasonable compression to it, probably not going to crush the edges. It's just not. It's going to take way more force than that to get that card to compress to where those edges are crushed. Now, I wouldn't want to chance it. I don't want to be putting a $1,000 card into a case like this and hoping that that's going to be the case. But I just want you to know that when you see somebody selling something like that and it's in this case, it doesn't mean the card is complete trash and it's damaged and it's completely altered and you can't do anything with it. There's a lot of circumstances that go into it, and I just want people to understand some of that stuff. So hopefully this helped a little bit. If you have questions, or if you want to talk about it in the chat or whatever, that's completely fine too. I welcome that kind of stuff. I know that there's probably going to be some opinions that say otherwise, and great, let's hear them. I've done this for many, many years, and I understand what's going on with these cases, and I understand what's going on with these cards, and I'm completely fine with the debate about it. So hopefully this helped, and till next time.